The wind in the hollow zone carried a scent of rust and old embers, as if the land itself still remembered the firestorm that had scorched it 1,000 years ago. Ash danced across the broken temple floor like restless spirits, stirred by the faintest breeze that slipped through shattered stained glass. Kael Ardyn stood barefoot in the center of the ruined sanctuary, eyes closed, hands clasped in silent prayer. He didn't pray to any god in particular. There were none left worth praying to, but the act itself brought stillness. In a world of scavengers and fragment wars, stillness was rare and precious. The cracked floor beneath him hummed faintly, as if echoing with the voices of those long gone. Still kneeling to ghosts, a voice called from the corridor. Light, teasing. Kael opened his eyes slowly. Sister Era stood there, leaning on a splintered doorway with her arms crossed, a smudge of soot on her cheek, and a worn satchel at her hip. He offered her a faint smile. They're quiet company. You say that now. But wait until one starts whispering back. She walked forward, her boots crunching over scattered glass, and handed him a small roll of dried fruit. It was all they had left. You're not eating again, she scolded gently. I'm fine, Kael murmured, biting into the fruit anyway. It was tough, sour, but helped anchor him. For years, the hollow zone had been quiet, the ruins of the old war long forgotten by the squabbling kingdoms. Their temple, once a sanctuary for wandering orphans and exiles, stood as a forgotten outpost beyond borders and maps. But rumors had started to creep in with the dust. Whispers of relic hunters, mercenaries, and worse. They were searching for fragments buried in the scorched lands. Kael didn't care for war or relics. He had no ambitions of glory. He wanted only the quiet. To wake up, sweep the temple halls, fix broken stones, and listen to the wind whisper across the ash. That was enough. But peace never lasted long on the blue planet. A sound shattered the moment. Boom! The temple walls trembled. Dust rained from above. A second crash followed, sharper, closer. Then, screaming, Kael dropped the half-eaten fruit. Era's eyes went wide. Stay here. She turned, sprinting toward the eastern hall where the sound had come from. But Kael didn't listen. He ran after her. The once hollow temple had become a chaos of flame and panic. Raiders, 5, maybe more, had breached the gate. They wore no colors, no armor, just jagged steel and faces wrapped in cloth. One held a torch, another carried a shard, a faintly glowing crystal blade that shimmered with pale blue light. Fragment wielders. Kael froze behind column. Era was ahead, trying to usher the younger children behind the altar. She turned just in time to block a descending blade with a rusted staff, the shock of it knocking her backward. Kael, run, she shouted, but something else called to him. A sound. No, not sound. A pull. It came from beneath the temple, from a buried chamber no one was supposed to enter. Kael's legs moved before he realized it, down a broken stairwell, through forgotten stone tunnels, into the underbelly of the temple, the tomb of what was once a blade's resting place. He had always been forbidden from coming near, but the pull was magnetic, like something was waiting, watching. The chamber was cold, silent, a perfect circle carved in ancient stone, lit only by a flickering torch on the wall. At its center lay a blackened blade, cracked, half fused to the ground, as if melted into the earth. Kael stepped closer. The moment he did, the silence shattered. A voice filled his head, not loud, not angry, just tired. Do you still carry grief? Kael stumbled backward. The voice wasn't male or female. It was both, and neither. Ancient. He looked at the blade. The cracked metal began to glow, veins of ember running through it like smoldering veins beneath flesh. He should have run, but something in him answered. I do. And the blade replied. Then burn with me. Flame exploded around him. Not hot, not painful. It flooded his vision, his chest, his bones. Memories not his own surged through him. Firestorms, war cries, a sword swung with rage and sorrow. The world twisted, and he screamed as the power tore through his spine and coiled around his heart. Above, the battle had reached its peak. Era stood bleeding, cornered by 2 fragment wielders. Then Kael emerged from the stairwell. His footsteps burned. The raiders turned, blades raised. But the flame lashed out. A burst of crimson fire roared from Kael's palm, not outward, but upward, like a geyser of sorrow. The ceiling cracked. Ash rained like snow. The raiders staggered back in shock. What is he? Kael didn't know how he moved. He didn't even feel his body. He was both inside and outside himself, watching and acting. His arm raised, and with it, fire coiled like a serpent. The torchbearer swung. Kael ducked. Instinct. No, memory. From a blade. From the ashen requiem. He struck with an open palm, and flame exploded from his sleeve. The raider flew back, armor seared. The others hesitated, but Kael was already collapsing. His vision blurred. The fire inside him hissed, not out of fuel, but burning his fuel. His life. Kael. Era's voice cut through the ringing in his ears. She was beside him, pulling him up. We have to run. He looked at her, dazed. I can't hold it back. It's eating me. She didn't answer. She just ran, dragging him with her through the shattered halls, past weeping children, past fire, past the blood-stained stones that had once been their home. Behind them, the ashen requiem left a trail of glowing footprints. The temple burned, and the quiet was gone. The fire was gone, but the burn remained. Kael's eyes fluttered open to the gray-blue light of dawn, flickering against a crumbled ceiling. His chest ached like it had been hollowed out and filled with smoke. His limbs were stiff, every movement like wading through ash. He was lying on stone, cold, wet, and unfamiliar. Above him, the sky stretched open, vast and clouded, with a pale sunrise bleeding across the horizon. He wasn't in the temple anymore. For a moment, he just breathed. The scent of scorched earth still clung to his skin, mingled with sweat and soot. Somewhere nearby, a bird called out, sharp and distant, as if even the wildlife had to keep its voice low in the hollow zone. He sat up, wincing. Everything felt wrong. His robes were torn, caked with dry blood. His right hand trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. An echo. The faint memory of heat still pulsed beneath his skin. That flame, it wasn't a dream. He remembered the way it had burst out of him. Uncontrolled, wild, beautiful and terrifying. Not like the stories of trained blade wielders who danced through battle with elegant precision. No, this had been raw, like grief given form. He looked around. They were in the remains of a collapsed watchtower, half swallowed by the cliffs east of the temple. Vines curled through the stone, and shattered armor lay in pieces nearby, rusted by time. It had likely been abandoned since the old wars, the kind of ruined scavengers avoided out of superstition. A figure sat at the edge of the tower's platform. Sister Era. She was wrapped in a tattered cloak, staring out over the valley below with hollow eyes. Her staff rested at her side, splintered. She didn't turn when she spoke. You shouldn't be standing yet. Kael pulled the cloak tighter around himself and stood anyway, even if his legs protested. How long have we been here? A day. Maybe a little more. Is everyone else alive? Most of them. She finally turned to face him, and Kael's breath caught. Her left eye was swollen, dark with bruising. A gash ran along her temple, roughly bandaged. Her voice, usually calm and teasing, now carried the weight of quiet fatigue. They scattered during the escape, she said. I got a few out through the tunnels before the whole thing collapsed. Kael stepped closer. I don't, she cut in, not harshly, but with a kind of finality. Don't say you're sorry. You didn't light the torch. You didn't bring the raiders. But I lit something else, Kael said quietly. He looked down at his hands. That fire, it came from inside me. From the blade. She was silent for a moment. Then she nodded. I saw it. Kael sat beside her, letting the quiet stretch between them. Below, the hollow zone spread out like a scar across the earth. Broken fields of glassy rock, scattered ruins, and distant storms that never seemed to move. It was a dead land, but also a hiding place. A no-man's land between kingdoms. Era finally broke the silence. Years ago, before you were old enough to understand, we were warned. Kael glanced at her. An old man came to the temple, she continued. Said he was a seer from Varelen. Claimed this place was cursed. Said something slept beneath it. Something left over from the shattering. Something tied to fire. Kael's heart skipped. You knew. I thought he was mad. Most seers are. She exhaled slowly. But he looked at you. Just you. Called you a kindled echo. Said the flame would find you when grief outweighed fear. Kael lowered his gaze. I didn't mean for this to happen. I know, she said. That's why we're not going to waste it. He looked up. I've seen what fragment wielders can do, Era said. Most don't survive the bonding. Those that do, they burn out within weeks, their minds shattered or their bodies ruined. Kael swallowed. But you didn't shatter, she said, her voice firm now. You woke something old, and you're still here. He couldn't tell if it was comfort or a warning. Kael, she said, turning to him. They'll come for you. He didn't need to ask who. Someone will have seen the flames, she continued. The Ashen Requiem was one of the forbidden fragments, the kind the kingdoms pretend no longer exist. Now it's lit again. That means war. Kael was quiet. I can't protect you, she said. Not against that. He felt the words settle in his chest like a cold stone. I don't want to run, he said finally. You don't have to, she replied. You just have to survive. A faint smile touched her lips, tired but sincere. And maybe figure out how to stop bursting into flame every time someone swings a sword at you. Kael snorted. Just once. A flicker of humor in the ash. She handed him a small bundle, cloth-wrapped and tied with leather. Food, water, a map. I drew it myself, so you'll probably get lost. He took it with both hands. Thank you. She stood slowly, wincing. I'm going to find the others. If I can gather the children, I'll take them east. The forests of Arellan might still have room for ghosts. Kael stood as well. I'll head north, he said, toward the Stormwatch peaks. She tilted her head. That's mercenary country. I need answers, he said. I need to know what I've become. She looked at him for a long moment, then reached out and pulled him into a brief, tight hug. You're still Kael, she whispered. Don't forget that. He didn't answer. She turned and disappeared into the morning mist, cloak trailing behind her like smoke. Kael stood at the edge of the ruin for a long time. The wind blew cold across the valley, and the ashes of yesterday still clung to his boots. He looked down at his hand. The mark was still there, a faint ember line beneath his skin, curling around his wrist like a faded scar. The price of power, or maybe its promise. He took a deep breath. Then he began to walk, north, into the unknown. The road north was a winding ribbon of broken stone, half consumed by mist and silence. Kael moved through it like a shadow, his hood drawn low and his bundle clutched tight to his side. Each step took him farther from the temple ruins, farther from Era, from the only home he'd ever known. The further he walked, the quieter the world became. The hollow zone wasn't truly silent. Its quiet had texture, the crunch of ash beneath worn boots, the rustle of dry wind sweeping across bone-white hills, the distant groan of something old shifting beneath the ground. Every sound felt like it might be the last before danger announced itself. Kael didn't know how to walk like a traveler. He walked like someone unsure if he was even allowed to be here, pausing often, scanning the horizon, listening for anything that moved too quickly or too quietly. He hadn't slept since the tower. The fire still flickered in his bones, low and distant now. Not enough to harm him, not enough to use. Just there, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. His water was half gone. His food, chewed to crumbs. The stars overhead had shifted twice. It had been at least 2 days since he left Era, and he wasn't alone anymore. Kael first noticed it in the valley beneath the stone spine of Mount Varn. Footprints. Fresh. Boots. 3 pairs. Deep in the soil. Too heavy for scavengers. Too careful for refugees. He ducked behind a shale outcrop, eyes narrowing. From the ridge above, he could see them now. 3 figures moving in a staggered line through the mist. All armed. All fragmentless. At least from what he could see. Mercenaries? He should have turned back. Instead, he followed. Not out of curiosity, but necessity. They were heading toward a structure he'd seen earlier from the cliffs. A stone camp built into the side of a hill. Smoke rose faintly from it, lazy and gray. If there was shelter, Kael needed it, even if he had to earn it with a lie. He waited until they disappeared into the camp, then crept down the slope. The structure was half-ruined, an old watchpost reinforced with salvaged metal and makeshift barricades. A banner fluttered above the entrance, deep maroon with a crude symbol painted in tar, a fong piercing the sun. He didn't recognize the sigil. He approached slowly, keeping his hands visible, the bundle at his side. 2 men stood at the gate. One leaned on a pike. The other had a crossbow slung low and eyes that never stopped moving. The one with the crossbow spoke. "You're either brave or stupid, walking in like that." Kael stopped 3 paces away. "Neither. Just tired." The crossbowman glanced at the other, who shrugged. "He's alone. Looks half-starved. Probably another hollow stray." The first man waved Kael forward. "What's your name?" Kael hesitated. "Ardyn. Just Ardyn." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. "You got coin, Ardyn?" "No. Got food. Trade. Just a map. And hands." The crossbowman raised a brow. "You offering labor?" "I'm offering not to be a problem," Kael said. "Just need a place to sleep. One night." A silence stretched. Then the other man snorted. "Let him in. If he tries anything, we've got plenty of bones to bury him with." The gate creaked open. Kael stepped inside. The camp was small. 4 tents, a stone hall, and a fire pit. A few mercenaries lingered near the flames, cooking something that smelled vaguely of meat and metal. One woman sharpened her blade without looking up. Another repaired armor with trembling fingers and a distant gaze. No one greeted him. He was a shadow here, another stranger in a land full of ghosts. He found a corner near the broken wall and sat, careful not to make eye contact. The fire crackled in the center of the camp, but it offered no warmth to outsiders. Eventually, someone approached. A woman, tall, wrapped in a fur-lined coat that had clearly once been military issue. Her left arm was mechanical, metal joints hissing softly as she folded them. She looked down at Kael without blinking. "You're not for Dravith," she said. "No, not Varelen either." "No, too soft for Akram." Kael gave her a tired look. "You're very good at guessing." She grinned just slightly. "I'm good at seeing what doesn't fit." He didn't answer. She crouched beside him, mechanical fingers tapping on her knee. "Name's Sarah, captain of this sorry pack. We keep watch on the road for bounty runners and relic thieves." "You're neither, so I don't care." Kael nodded. "But you glow." His breath caught. Sarah tilted her head. "Not now, but you did. I've seen that fire before." Kael remained silent. She leaned closer, voice low. "You bonded with something, didn't you? A fragment." His heart thudded once hard. "I don't know what I bonded with," he said truthfully. She searched his face, as if weighing the shape of his words. "Fair," she said finally. "Keep it buried. People here would gut you in your sleep for half a relic." She stood. "If you're smart, Ardyn, you'll run farther than north. That fire in you, it shines like a beacon. The wrong people are already hunting the glow." She walked away. Kael sat there for a long time, the mist curling around the edges of the broken stone wall. He didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Not when he heard a voice in the dark again, soft, distant, as if spoken through layers of smoke. "The fire is not your curse. It is your question." Kael closed his eyes, letting the sound of the wind lull him. He didn't have answers, but he had a direction. And in the morning, he'd keep walking. Dawn broke slowly, pale and colorless over the hollow zone. Kael left the mercenary outpost without a word. No one stopped him. The fire from the central pit had already died, leaving only smoldering coals. A few half-awake guards watched him go with hollow eyes, too tired or indifferent to care. Sarah was nowhere in sight. Maybe she was already scouting, or maybe she didn't say goodbye on purpose. He didn't blame her. The kind of people who stayed alive out here didn't make attachments. They made calculations. Kael didn't know yet which he was, someone drifting like smoke or someone slowly burning down. The land beyond the camp was an endless expanse of ridges and ravines, choked with dead brush and brittle roots. Every few miles, Kael passed the bones of old war machines, carriages with rusted claws, cannons fused to stone by ancient heat, relics from the time of the blades. None of them had names, just ghosts and ash. Kael kept moving, following the map Era had drawn for him, north, toward the old trade route known as the Ridge Path. If the path hadn't collapsed, it would eventually lead to a ruined stronghold, once called Verdel's Hold, a halfway point between the Hollow Zone and the borders of civilized kingdoms. According to Era, it was also abandoned. But Kael knew better now. Nothing on the blue planet ever stayed abandoned for long. By midday, the mist began to thin, and Kael reached the edges of an old bridge, a jagged stone arch stretching across a ravine. Half its supports had crumbled into the gorge below, and deep cracks split the surface. Vines and skeletal trees grew out of the sides like veins on dying skin. He approached carefully. Every step made gravel shift underfoot, the sound unnervingly loud. He knelt near the edge, brushing his hand along a faded symbol etched into the stone. A sun, pierced by a fawn. His heart stilled. The same symbol from the mercenary camp. They'd been here before. Recently. Kael stood and stepped lightly across the bridge, keeping his weight near the edges where the stone felt thicker. Below, the wind moaned through the canyon, low, mournful. He didn't dare look down. Halfway across, he heard the sound. A crack, then a voice. You walk like someone afraid to fall. Kael spun. A figure stood at the far side of the bridge, calm, poised, dressed in dark gray, traveler's garb. A hood masked most of their face, but the air around them shimmered faintly. Kael felt it. Fragment energy. His instinct screamed, but his body froze. The figure took a step forward, then another. Light, deliberate. I watched you leave the camp, they said. Didn't think you'd make it this far alone. But then again, you're not exactly alone, are you? Kael's hand twitched at his side. The fire stirred. You've got something inside you, the figure said, voice smooth, almost kind. Old. Dangerous. I can see it even now, flickering under your skin. Kael didn't respond. He was watching. Every movement, every twitch of fabric. The figure stopped 5 paces away. I'm not here to kill you, they said. If I was, you'd be ash already. Kael's voice was hoarse. Then what do you want? To see what kind of fire you are. And then, they moved. Fast. A blur. Kael barely raised his arm in time as a whip of wind lashed toward him. Not air. Exactly. Pressure, compressed like a hammer. It struck his shoulder and sent him stumbling back, feet skidding on crumbling stone. He caught himself. The bridge groaned beneath his weight. The figure came again, hands weaving through the air, summoning arcs of wind that cut like blades. Kael dodged the first, blocked the second, and the third grazed his cheek, drawing a hot sting. His heart pounded. The fire roared to life in his core. No, not yet. He grit his teeth. He had to control it this time. The figure paused, watching him, still holding back. Impressive. Most new wielders burn out after the first spark. Kael steadied his breath. You're testing me, he said. I'm seeing if you're worth the hunt. The figure shifted into a stance, one hand behind their back, the other extended forward. A narrow burst of wind gathered in their palm, swirling faster and faster. Kael reached inside himself, to that ember, to that voice. You burn when you choose to. He closed his eyes for a split second, and when he opened them, flame licked along his fingers, soft and focused. Not wild, not explosive, just controlled. He moved. This time he was faster. He ducked low, the flame traveling from his arm to his palm, forming a short whip of fire that he cracked through the air. It met the wind blast in midair, and for an instant, both powers clashed, spiraling into steam and smoke. The force of it rocked the bridge. Stone cracked. Kael leapt back just in time as the center of the bridge gave way. The figure staggered. Enough, they called, raising both hands. Kael froze, chest heaving. The wind died. Silence returned. The stranger pulled back their hood, revealing a girl, no older than Kael, with storm-gray eyes and windswept hair. My name is Silo, she said. Kael blinked. You attacked me. I was hired to observe, not kill. Observe what? If the Ashen Requiem really chose someone. Kael stepped back. You know the name. Everyone who matters knows the name, Silo said, brushing soot from her sleeves. Most think it's myth, but I saw it. You are the Requiem's vessel. Kael hesitated. So what now? Silo shrugged. I was supposed to track you. Send word. But I'm bored of that. She turned, gesturing for him to follow. You want answers, right? I know where to find some. Kael narrowed his eyes. Why help me? Because if the old fragments are waking up again. She grinned, mischievous. I'd rather be near the fire than crushed under it. Kael didn't trust her, but the road behind was gone, and the trail ahead was paved with flame. He followed. They walked in silence for nearly an hour. Kael kept his distance, trailing a few steps behind the girl who'd introduced herself as Silo, the one who'd nearly knocked him off a collapsing bridge with wind-formed blades and smug confidence. Her pace was light, as if the dust and cracked stone beneath her boots were no heavier than snow. Even the gusts around them seemed to move when she did, softly parting before her, brushing her cloak like familiar hands. Kael didn't trust her, but the path forward demanded he follow. "I can feel you glaring," Silo said at last, without turning around. Kael didn't answer. "You know," she continued, casually stepping over a fallen tree trunk, "most people are a little more grateful when someone decides not to kill them. You tested me, obviously." She glanced over her shoulder with a grin. "How else am I supposed to know if you're worth traveling with?" Kael frowned. "I didn't ask you to." Silo stopped. He nearly bumped into her. She turned, resting her hands on her hips. "You've got the Ashen Requiem inside you. You lit it. You survived it. And you still don't realize what that means." "I didn't survive it," Kael muttered. "I'm still burning." Silo tilted her head. There was no mockery in her gaze now, just quiet curiosity, maybe even a little admiration. "Good," she said. "Means you're not numb yet." She turned again and kept walking. Kael followed. They traveled along a winding pass that clung to the cliffs overlooking the hollow valley. From up here, Kael could see the scars left behind by old wars, shattered spires, fields of stone melted into glass, and skeletons of things too large to be human. Some of the bones moved slightly in the breeze, creaking like wind chimes made by giants. "This whole region used to be part of the Blade Vanguard's borderlands," Silo said, pointing lazily to the valley. "Back when the gods still played favorites and sent chosen ones to clean up their messes." Kael said nothing. He'd heard the stories, the myths, but now, having felt the fire himself, he was beginning to understand what those gifts really were. Not blessings, burdens. "How do you know so much?" he asked. Silo shrugged. "I worked for enough war bands and collectors. People who chase old power. You start to recognize the smell of it." They crested a hill where the wind shifted, colder now, tinged with something metallic. Down below, nestled between jagged ridges, sat a ruin partially swallowed by the earth. Cracked pillars jutted upward at odd angles. Thorn vines twisted around shattered statues. But one structure remained mostly intact, a dome-shaped building of black stone, with a broken doorway and no roof. Kael felt it immediately. That pull again. Low, subtle, but there. Silo turned, already watching him. "Feel that?" He nodded. "Good. You're not broken yet." She started down the slope, boots skidding over loose shale. Kael followed carefully, unsure if the ache building in his chest was instinct, fear, or the fragment itself waking again. As they stepped into the ruin, the wind died completely. Silence closed around them. Silo lit a dim lantern and held it up, revealing a descending staircase carved into the floor. "This was an old blade watch point," she explained. "The kind they used during the shattering to monitor fragment resonance." Kael's throat felt dry. "So there could be more, like mine. Dormant, maybe. Dead, probably." She glanced at him. Or waiting. They descended into the dark. The stairwell smelled of dust and rusted chains. Faint symbols lined the walls, ancient sigils of balance and flame, half erased by time. At the base, the stair opened into a circular chamber lined with stone pillars and shattered altars. In the center sat a pedestal, cracked, blackened. Kael stepped forward slowly, his vision blurred. For a moment, the room shimmered, not with light, but with memory. He saw the chamber whole again. Torchlight, crimson banners, a warrior kneeling at the pedestal, hands bleeding, mouth whispering a name Kael didn't understand. "Ashen Requiem. I offer grief." Then, gone. The vision snapped away. Kael stumbled back, breath catching. "You saw something," Silo said quietly. Kael nodded. "It was a memory, not mine." "That's how it starts," she said. "Fragments hold echoes. The stronger the bond, the clearer the echo." He sat down on a broken step, gripping his knees. "I don't want this," he muttered. Silo sat across from him. "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes the flame chooses before you know you've been lit." Kael looked up. "Why help me?" Silo leaned back, arms folded behind her head. "Because I don't like the people who are going to come looking for you." "Who are they?" She hesitated. "The ones who want to reforge the Blade Order, and the ones who want to destroy it forever. And you." "I'm just someone who hates being bored." Kael studied her. She was smiling again, but beneath it was something sharper, a kind of controlled recklessness, like someone walking a tightrope for fun, just to see how far she could lean before she fell. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure. Are you bonded?" Silo blinked, then chuckled. "You mean, do I have a fragment?" He nodded. She raised one hand. Wind swirled gently around her fingers, then disappeared. "I bonded with a fragment called Era's Whisper," she said. "Lightweight, responsive, great for vanishing fast." "Does it burn you?" Kael asked. She shook her head. "Not anymore, but it used to. Badly." Kael looked at his hands, still faintly warm, even now. "How did you learn to control it?" "I didn't," she said. "I just stopped fighting it." He let that sit. They sat together in the ruins a while longer, listening to the wind finally return outside. That night, they made camp just outside the Watchpoint ruin. Kael lay beside the fire, eyes open, watching the embers rise like tiny stars. Silo had fallen asleep sitting up, her back to a rock, arms crossed. The quiet reminded Kael of the temple, of nights when he'd sneak out to the broken courtyard and stare at the moon, pretending it was close enough to touch. Back then, the world had felt so far away. Now, it felt like it was rushing toward him. He closed his eyes, but before sleep came, the voice returned, soft, low, older than language. "The flame you carry is not yours alone. It remembers." Kael didn't move. "Will you learn to carry it, or be consumed by it?" The voice faded, the fire hissed, and sleep took him. The sun never truly shone in the hollow zone. Even when it rose clear above the horizon, its light felt diluted, pale and strained, like a lantern trying to cut through smoke. The world remained gray, washed out, and still. Kael awoke to that kind of light, the kind that didn't warm, only revealed. Silo was already awake. She sat perched on a nearby rock, her cloak fluttering in the wind, hair tangled by the breeze. She stared toward the east, eyes narrowed, jaw set. Kael sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. His body ached, but it was the right kind of ache, the kind that meant he'd survive the night without the fire trying to eat him from the inside. "Progress, maybe." "You dream again?" Silo asked, not looking at him. He hesitated. "Yes." She finally turned. Same voice. Kael nodded. It said the flame remembers. Silo muttered something under her breath. "That's not ideal." Kael raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" "It means you're not just bonded to a fragment. You're bonded to one of the old ones. The kind that still carries echoes of its original wielder." Kael's chest tightened. "Do you know who that was?" "No," Silo said, slipping down from the rock and starting to pack her things. "And I'd rather not. The deeper the echo, the more likely it is to twist your mind. Make you think you're remembering your own past, when you're just reliving someone else's." Kael looked down at his hands. They were steady this morning. Too steady. What if I can't separate them? Silo didn't answer. Instead, she tossed him a strip of dried meat. "Eat, then we move. There's something nearby I want you to see." They traveled east for several hours, skirting around deep fissures in the ground and fields of thorn vines that rustled when no wind touched them. Kael kept pace, his boots scraping against dry stone. He felt stronger today. Not fast, not skilled, but centered. A quiet steadiness pulsed in his limbs, as if the fire was no longer gnawing, just simmering. "You're adjusting," Silo said suddenly, glancing back at him. Kael blinked. "To what?" "The bond," she said. "You're walking straighter, not flinching as much. I can tell the requiem isn't ripping at you the way it was 2 days ago." He frowned. "It's still there, still hot. It'll always be there," she replied. "But if it started to listen, that's good." They crested another rise and stopped. Below them, a structure emerged from the ash-covered earth, ancient, rectangular, and sunken halfway into the ground. Its walls were covered in black vines and broken runes, and two massive stone hands jutted up from either side of the entrance, palms facing skyward. "What is this place?" Kael asked quietly. Silo's expression grew serious. "An archive, or what's left of one." He turned to her. "You brought me to a ruin full of books." "Not books. Echoes." The entrance was half collapsed, but they squeezed through a narrow gap and entered a corridor that smelled of dry mold and scorched stone. The air shifted as they moved, heavier, charged, like lightning waiting to fall. Silo moved without hesitation, her fingers grazing the walls occasionally as they walked. Kael followed more slowly, feeling each step like it might trip something ancient. Eventually, they reached the inner chamber, a circular room lined with mirrored surfaces, all cracked or scorched. At the center stood a pedestal with a hollow dome above it. Kael approached. "What is this?" Silo answered softly. "A memory vault. Fragments of the old war, stored in crystalline ash. If the requiem echoes loud enough, it might answer here." Kael stared at the pedestal. The dust covering it had been undisturbed for decades. He reached out, slowly, pressing his palm to the center. The stone felt cold. Then, heat, not pain, just warmth, blooming from his chest outward. A low hum filled the air. Then the mirrors lit up. Faint flickers of flame danced across the glass. Not reflections, but images. Fuzzy, distorted. Kael's breath caught as the room shifted around him. A battlefield, not real, but projected, shimmering like heat haze. Soldiers in black armor clashing with beings made of golden fire. Screams echoed in distant memory. Above them, a single warrior wreathed in red flame cleaved through both sides, alone and furious. Kael's knees buckled. He knew that warrior. He'd seen them in his dreams. A voice echoed from the chamber. "Balance is ash. Fire does not obey." Silo caught him as he stumbled back. "Kael!" He gasped, clutching his chest. The flame inside him surged once. Not violently, but with clarity. And then the vision vanished. The mirrors went dark. Silence returned. Kael sat there, panting, sweat trailing down his spine. Silo knelt beside him. "You saw something." He nodded. "A war. The requiem was fighting everyone." Her expression darkened. "So it's true." Kael looked at her. "Your flame isn't a weapon," she said. "It's a rebellion. The one that broke away from all the others." He stared at the mirror walls, the words echoing in his mind. Fire does not obey. They left the vault in silence. Outside, the wind had picked up again, sharp and dry, pulling at their cloaks as they walked. Kael felt different now. Not stronger, not calmer, just aware. The requiem wasn't something he had tamed. It was something he'd awakened. And somewhere in the world, others had likely felt it too. That night, they camped beneath a shattered archway, overlooking a dried-up riverbed. Kael couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, knees drawn up, staring at the embers. "Do you think the requiem chose me?" he asked quietly. Silo opened one eye from where she lay. "It doesn't work like that." "Then how?" She yawned. "Fragments aren't alive. Not really. They don't choose so much as resonate. They're drawn to certain emotions. Memories, loss, rage, love. All the stuff that's too heavy for your heart to carry alone." Kael thought back to the temple, to the fire, to Era's voice screaming his name as the world burned behind him. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," he said. "You still aren't," Silo replied, smirking. "You're just someone who lit a fire because you were hurting." Kael looked up at the stars, pale dots in the ashen sky. "I don't want to hurt anyone else." "Then learn to wield it," Silo said, "before someone else does it for you." The wind howled softly across the ruins. Kael closed his eyes, and somewhere, deep in the corners of his mind, the requiem stirred. Listening, waiting. Kael was dreaming again. But this time, the fire didn't burn. It whispered. He stood in a field of gray snow, ash, drifting endlessly from a sky without clouds. Around him, fragments of broken weapons jutted from the earth like the bones of forgotten titans. Wind carried voices he couldn't quite hear. Not words, just intention, regret, fury, silence. At the center of the field stood the warrior from his visions, cloaked in flickering fire, one eye burning brighter than the other, the sword in their hand pulsing with grief. Kael tried to speak, but his voice vanished into the snow. Then, slowly, the warrior turned. "They will come for the flame, and they will carry iron and sorrow." The figure raised a blade. Flame wrapped around their body like a shroud. Kael flinched and woke to the scent of blood. Silo was already moving. She crouched beside the fire, expression sharp, one hand outstretched. Wind curled gently around her fingers, alert, tensed. Kael sat up slowly, blinking against the early gray light. "What is it?" he whispered. Her answer was quiet. "Tracks. New ones." She pointed toward the ridge. Kael followed her gaze. There, in the dust, fresh boot prints. Broad, heavy, not made by scavengers or bandits. These were disciplined steps. Wary, measured. Kael's breath caught. They found us. Could be a scouting unit, Silo said. Could be worse. She pulled her cloak tighter and stood, glancing toward the eastern slope. We move. Now. The trail east led them across a stretch of shattered terrain, where jagged stone formed a maze of trenches and collapsed ridgelines. The sun stayed low behind clouds, offering only the weakest light. Kael moved carefully, keeping his head low. The burn inside him was awake, not flaring, but restless, like it sensed something drawing near. After an hour, Silo raised a fist and dropped into a crouch. Kael mirrored her, ducking low behind a spire of broken rock. Below them, in a clearing shaped like a scar across the earth, four figures moved in formation. Black cloaks, crimson shoulder crests, long spears strapped to their backs, and iron masks, full-faced, featureless save for a slit of dark glass over the eyes. Silo whispered the words like a curse. Ash sworn. Kael frowned. What are they? Hunters, she said tightly. Agents from the kingdom of Draveth. Their only job is to track down fragment wielders like you and take the power back. Why the masks? To keep them sane, she said. They use suppressor seals inside. Blocks out resonance from nearby fragments. Kael's pulse quickened. Can they sense me? Not from here. But if we get too close. She didn't finish. The lead Ashsworn turned suddenly, as if sniffing the air, and raised a hand. The group stopped. Kael didn't breathe. Then, the lead figure snapped their fingers. From the trees emerged a bound prisoner, tall, cloaked in rags, limping. A collar glowed faintly at his neck. Silo cursed under her breath. A captured wielder. The Ashsworn surrounded him. One of them stepped forward, raised their hand, and pressed it to the man's forehead. A pulse of red light surged out from the contact, and the man screamed. Kael lurched to his feet, but Silo grabbed his arm. Don't, she hissed. You'll only get yourself caught. They're torturing him. They're extracting the fragment. If he can't handle it, it'll burn out of him. Kael stared, helpless, as the man fell to his knees. His eyes went wide, and for a moment, Kael saw the resonance flicker, gold and blue, like sunlight on water. Then it collapsed. The man slumped forward, dead. The fragment, now reduced to a faint flicker, floated toward the Ashsworn sealed container. Kael felt bile rise in his throat. How can they do that? Silo didn't answer, but her hand was trembling. They moved again once the Ashsworn left the clearing. Kael didn't speak for a long time. The silence between them was brittle, sharp around the edges. Eventually, Silo broke it. They're trained from childhood, conditioned, fragmentless by choice. They believe the gods entrusted them with control. Kael's voice was hollow. Control of what? Power, she said. The kind that doesn't belong to anyone anymore. He stopped walking. Silo turned to look at him. I can't let that happen to me, Kael said. You won't, she replied. You don't know that. I don't have to. She stepped closer. Because I've seen the other kind. The wielders who lose themselves. The ones who go mad from the echo or drunk on the flame. She tapped his chest, once firm. You're not them. Not yet. But you could be. Kael lowered his gaze. So what do I do? Silo drew a sharp breath, then glanced toward the southeast. We head for the Veiled Cliffs. There's an old outpost hidden there, from before the shattering. Some say a fragment seer still lives there. One of the last who can read your bond without going insane. Kael blinked. That's real. Maybe, she said. Or maybe it's just a story. But if anyone can tell you what the Requiem really wants, it'll be her. Kael nodded slowly. The path was clear, and fire was at his back. That night, they made camp in a crevice shielded by overhanging stone. Kael couldn't sleep. The fire inside him pulsed quietly. Not angry, not loud. Just there. Silo leaned back against the wall, chewing slowly on dried roots. You're thinking too loudly, she muttered. Kael glanced up. What if I'm not strong enough? To fight the Ashsworn? To carry this? He gestured to himself. She watched him for a long time, then said softly, You don't have to carry it alone. He blinked. What? I mean it, she said. You're not the only one the flame changed. You're not the only one who's scared of what it means. She looked away. I just hide it better. A silence stretched. Kael sat down beside her, not touching, but close. For a while, they just listened to the crackle of their tiny fire, the sound echoing softly between the stone walls. Then Kael whispered, "Thank you." Silo didn't reply, but she didn't move away either. And in the dark, Kael felt the fire settle. Not extinguished, not controlled, just calmer. For now. The veiled cliffs rose like broken fingers from the earth. Jagged, pale gray stone veined with silver, ore, and shrouded in near-constant mist. Even from a distance, they looked unnatural. The wind bent strangely around them, and no birds circled overhead. Nothing lived near the cliffs. Kael and Silo stood at the base, looking up through the swirling haze. "This place feels wrong," Kael said softly. Silo adjusted her cloak. "Good. That means we're in the right spot." They traveled through the night and half the morning to reach this place, following barely visible markers etched into the rocks. Old glyphs in a language neither of them fully understood. But the pull Kael felt had returned. Not as sharp as the Requiem's initial surge, but steady, like a magnet buried in the mountain. "She's up there," Kael asked. "If she's alive," Silo said, "or if she was ever real." Kael raised an eyebrow. "That's comforting." Silo flashed a crooked smile. "You're welcome." The climb was slow, not dangerous, but exhausting. Narrow switchbacks carved into the cliff face, half eroded by time and rain. Mist clung to their skin, cool and heavy, beating on Kael's hair and seeping into his clothes. His hands ached by the time they reached the first plateau, and his breath came in short, fog bursts. But the fire in his chest remained quiet, dormant, waiting. Finally, after what felt like hours, the path widened, opening onto a narrow ridge that curved around a jagged outcrop of stone. Beyond it, tucked into the cliffside itself, was a structure carved directly into the rock. Simple, seamless, a doorway without a door. Kael stared. "That's it?" he asked. Silo stepped forward slowly. "That's it." The room beyond the entrance was dim, lit only by a few flickering crystal sconces embedded in the walls. The air smelled of herbs and something older. Not decay, more like dust left undisturbed for generations. At the center of the chamber sat a small stone table, and beside it, an old woman in a veil. She did not rise, did not speak. She simply waited. Silo took one step in and stopped. "She's real," she whispered. "I didn't think she'd still be here." Kael stepped forward, uncertain. The woman raised her hand. Her fingers were delicate, pale, as if carved from pearl. She gestured slowly to the seat across from her. Kael sat. Her voice, when it came, was neither weak nor aged. It was even, measured, and quiet, like water trickling through stone. "The flame walks again." Kael blinked. "You know what I carry?" She inclined her head. "The requiem is not subtle." Kael swallowed. "Then you're the seer?" "I was once called Tyone," she said. "Now, I am merely one who listens." Silo remained by the wall, silent. Kael hesitated. "Can you tell me what this fragment is?" "What once?" Tyone reached into a pouch and drew out a shard of polished obsidian. She held it over a small bowl inlaid with gold veins and whispered something Kael couldn't hear. The stone glowed faintly. A pulse. Kael felt it in his chest, the requiem answering. The fire stirred, not violently, not angrily, but awake. Tyone's fingers trembled. "It remembers far more than you should see." Kael gripped the edge of the table. "Then help me understand it." She looked up. "There is no understanding the requiem," she said. "Only endurance." It was the last flame, the one that refused to choose a side when the blade overfell. It was born not of duty or vengeance, but grief. Kael's breath caught. "Then why me?" Tyone studied him for a long moment. "You carry grief like a blade." That struck deeper than Kael expected. She continued. "It saw you, not as a warrior, but as a witness. One who lost something and asked nothing in return. The requiem answers not strength, but sorrow." Kael clenched his fists. "What does it want?" She closed her eyes. "To burn the lie of balance." He stared at her. "I don't know what that means." "You will," she said gently. "If you survive the echo." Silo stepped forward then. "You mentioned danger. Something worse than the ash swarm." Tyone nodded. "They're not the only ones who felt the requiem awaken." Kael's chest tightened. "Who else?" The seer's voice lowered. "There are others like you. Fragments that refuse to sleep. Some were taken. Some were hidden. But one was corrupted." Kael's pulse quickened. "What happened?" It fused with a man who no longer knew the difference between power and purpose. He calls himself the Pale Blade. He believes fragments must serve him or be destroyed. Kael glanced at Silo, who was now deathly still. He's hunting fragment wielders, she said. Tyone nodded. And you, she added to Kael, are a beacon. Tyone gave Kael a crystal pendant before they left, dull gray, veined with red. A resonance anchor, she explained. It will mask the worst of your flame for a time. Kael took it, feeling the fire inside him soften slightly the moment it touched his skin. Silo pulled her hood up as they exited the temple. They didn't speak until they were halfway down the cliff. Kael finally broke the silence. You knew about this Pale Blade. I'd heard whispers, she said, but I thought he was a myth. A warning tale told by old mercs around dying campfires. Kael looked at the horizon, where the mist met the scorched plains far below. I can't outrun this, can I? No, Silo said quietly. You can only burn through it. Kael took a breath. The wind pulled at his cloak, and the fire inside him pulsed once, calm but clear. He didn't know what came next, but he would meet it with open eyes. The descent from the veiled cliffs was colder than the climb. Kael didn't know if it was the wind or the words the seer had left behind that made him feel that way, as though the fire inside him now carried a shadow. The Pale Blade, a name spoken like a scar, quiet, deep, and hard to forget. He hadn't said much since leaving the mountaintop sanctuary. Silo hadn't pressured him. She walked ahead now, her silhouette cutting through the mist like a wind-worn dagger, cloak trailing behind her in shifting arcs. She hadn't looked back once. Kael followed, but something about his own footsteps had changed. They didn't echo like before. By midday, they reached the outer foothills, a place where ash gave way to dry grass and sparse, twisted trees. For the first time in days, Kael saw color in the landscape. Dull reds and rust browns, earthy tones stained by age but not burned to gray. Silo slowed, near a half-collapsed stone marker, pausing long enough for Kael to catch up. She crouched beside it and scraped moss off with her glove. Beneath the grime, a symbol came into view. 2 crescent moons crossed by a blade. Kael frowned. Another faction? Silo shook her head. Family crest. Yours. No, she said quietly. Yours. He stared. That's not possible, he said. Silo stood. Kael, did you ever wonder where you came from? Before the temple. Kael looked away. I was left at the gate when I was 5. That's all I know. She gestured toward the symbol. This region was once ruled by the Ardyn bloodline, a minor noble house before the Blade Order collapsed. Most of them were wiped out during the first Fragment Wars. He turned to her slowly. You think I'm from them? I don't think anything, Silo replied. But someone went to a lot of trouble to leave you far from the war. And this crest is too close to your name to ignore. Kael looked back at the marker. His fingers brushed across the worn stone. And in that moment, the fire inside him shivered. He closed his eyes and saw something. A woman, hair the color of soot, kneeling beside a stone altar, whispering a name. Kael, burn bright and forget us. Then the vision faded. Kael staggered. Silo caught him by the shoulder. What did you see? I think. He paused, breathing hard. I think someone hid me from the requiem. Silo's brow furrowed. You think your family tried to protect you from it? No, Kael said, shaking his head. They were protecting it from me. They camped near a dry stream bed that night, sheltering between 2 boulders. A few low shrubs fed their tiny fire, and for a while, the world felt distant again, like it was holding its breath. Kael sat with the crest stone on his lap, tracing the symbol over and over. Silo leaned back against her pack. You're quiet. I keep thinking about what the seer said, he murmured. About grief. About how the requiem doesn't want justice or balance. Just truth, Silo said. He nodded. But if my family tried to seal it away, maybe the truth was too dangerous. Silo looked up at the stars, faint pinpricks through low cloud cover. Maybe, she said. Or maybe they just didn't want the world to see what it had become. Kael turned toward her. You never told me about your family. Silo scoffed. That's because there's nothing to tell. He waited. She sighed. I was born in Zephyros, skybound slums. My parents traded clouds for grain. Then a warlord came looking for fragment scouts. Took every child who could read ether lines. Kael's eyes widened. They took you. She nodded. Put a seal on my arm. Made me train for years. I wasn't the best, but I was fast. So when I found Era's whisper and didn't die, they tried to turn me into a hunter. Did it work? She smiled bitterly. For a little while. Kael leaned forward. How did you escape? I didn't, she said softly. They let me go. Thought I'd come back after I saw what the world was like without them. Kael looked at her. You didn't. No, she said. Because I met someone else who was burning. And I remembered I still had choices. Silence settled between them. Then Kael asked, what happened to the one you met? Silo looked down. They didn't survive. Later, when the fire had burned low, Kael sat with the crest stone beside him, thinking about family, about fate, about how fire could be both a burden and a message. He didn't know if he wanted to belong to the Ardyn bloodline, but the Requiem had found him, or perhaps returned to him, for a reason. And now, the Pale Blade was hunting that reason. He held the pendant Tyone had given him. The flame inside stirred, and for the first time, Kael didn't feel afraid of it. He felt responsible. The ridge was quiet when they reached it. No wind, no birds, no ash falling, just stillness. Kael and Silo crouched low behind a cluster of rocks, overlooking the narrow mountain pass that wound its way through the scorched highlands. The path was ancient, once a trade route between border cities, now choked by time and left to rot in dust. But the prints in the soil were fresh. Boots, heavy, precise. Kael squinted. They're here, he said under his breath. Silo nodded. Ash sworn. 6 of them. They're setting up an ambush. Kael's eyes followed her pointing hand. The dark figures moved like ghosts, each one placing black sigils into the ground. Suppression wards. Resonance dampeners. Designed to trap a fragment wielder's power inside their own body. Who are they waiting for? He whispered. Silo didn't answer at first. Then she murmured, us. Kael's blood ran cold. They knew we'd come this way. They knew we'd leave the cliffs. Probably track the residual fire signature, Silo said. The Requiem's wake leaves scars. Kael touched the pendant Tyone had given him. The resonance anchor. It still pulsed gently, veiling his presence, but even he could feel it weakening now. The fire had grown, stronger, harder to hide. He closed his eyes, drawing a slow breath. The flame stirred in his chest, like a heart beating out of rhythm. Not panic, just alert. Silo studied him. If we try to run, they'll catch us. Then what do we do? She pulled something from her pouch, a vial filled with swirling mist. Pale green. Smoke bomb, she said. Buys us 20 seconds. Maybe. Kael looked at her. Maybe. She grinned. You wanted certainty? You should have stayed at the temple. He sighed. You're impossible. And you're combustible. She shot back. Let's go. They moved in silence, circling around the ash sworn from above, using the ridgeline as cover. Every step was deliberate, measured. Kael kept his breathing steady, even as the Requiem surged slightly with every heartbeat. He remembered Tyone's words. It does not seek obedience. It burns through lies. His fingers curled. A lie was waiting at the bottom of the hill. 6 armored zealots who believed power must belong only to those who could control it, or crush it. Silo signaled him. Now, she tossed the vial. A hiss. Then a violent plume of green fog erupted, swallowing the slope. Chaos followed. Shouts. Steel scraping against rock. Kael rushed forward, heart pounding, flame beginning to ripple beneath his skin. As the smoke cleared, he saw the ash-sworn moving in formation, weapons raised. One of them turned to him. His mask gleamed. He raised his arm, and the ground beneath Kael glowed with red runes. A suppression ward. Too late. Kael felt the ward snap into place like a cage, sudden pressure wrapping around his chest, throat, limbs. The fire inside him screamed, trying to escape, but it had nowhere to go. He dropped to one knee, teeth clenched. Kael, Silo shouted. He saw her rush another ash-sworn from the side, her blade slicing low. Wind exploded from her boots, launching her into a spinning arc. One of the enemies went flying, but the ward still bound Kael. The leader of the ash-sworn approached, spear in hand, mask unreadable. You are marked, he said flatly. Surrender the Requiem. Kael shook. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to no one, the man said. But your death will contain it. He raised the spear, and then, the pendant around Kael's neck shattered. A wave of heat burst outward, blowing back dust and grass. The fire surged through the suppression ward, not breaking it, but slipping between its seams like water through cracked glass. A clever fire, a sorrowful one. Kael stood. The ash-sworn froze. His right arm burned bright, not with flame, but glowing embers that traced up his skin like molten veins. "You want the requiem?" he whispered. The air shimmered around him, then burned with it. He moved, not fast but unstoppable. A burst of flame cracked the earth beneath him, launching him forward. He slammed his fist into the lead ash-sworn's chest. The armor withstood the impact, but the fire didn't strike the body. It struck the sigils inside the armor. They screamed. Kael's flame didn't burn flesh. It burned intention. Silo joined the fight, a blur of wind and steel. She danced between enemies, blades carving through exposed limbs and masks. Kael covered her, sending waves of controlled flame to scatter the formation. The ash-sworn fell back, not from fear, but from calculation. Their leader stood again, armor smoking, mask now cracked. "You've learned to direct it," he said, voice strained. "But you do not understand it." Kael didn't answer. "I was once like you," the man continued, "a bearer, until I learned that fire lies, that it promises freedom and delivers ash." He raised his weapon again. "I will silence it before it silences you." Kael took a step forward, but the world shuddered. Everyone froze. Even the wind stopped. Kael turned and saw the sky fracture. Far above, a jagged line split the clouds, like a wound tearing open. And from it descended a figure, clad in white, wreathed in gray flame. Silo took a step back. "No." Kael's voice came out as a whisper. "The Pale Blade." The ash-sworn leader dropped to one knee. "Lord." The figure landed gently, weightless, like snow on a grave. Kael couldn't breathe. The Pale Blade wore no armor, only robes that swirled unnaturally around him, edged with ember-like script. His face was serene, young, but his eyes were ancient. "I smelled the sorrow," he said softly, turning toward Kael. His voice was beautiful and wrong. Kael's fire roared in response, flaring without control. The Pale Blade tilted his head. "Requiem, you live again." Kael raised his arms, flame curling outward, but the Pale Blade did not move. He only said, "Not yet." And in an instant, Kael's fire was gone, extinguished. Silo shouted. Kael dropped to his knees, breath stolen, as if someone had pulled the core from his chest. The Pale Blade crouched beside him, looking directly into his eyes. "Let it burn," he whispered, "and come find me when your grief becomes purpose." Then he turned and vanished into ash. They didn't pursue. Not that they could. The ash-sworn scattered, some dragging the wounded. Others disappeared into smoke. Silo pulled Kael to his feet. His hands trembled. The fire inside him had gone silent. Not dead, just watching. "You saw him," he whispered. Silo nodded. "We all did." Kael looked to the east. The sky had already closed, but the scar had been left behind. A reminder, a warning, and a beginning. Kael didn't speak for a long time. Not after the Pale Blade vanished. Not as the ash-sworn retreated into the ravine. Not even as the sun began to set, casting blood-orange light across the wounded hillside where flame and steel had just collided. He sat against a half-burned tree, arms draped over his knees, gaze unfocused. The requiem inside him was still. No warmth, no home, no flame, just silence. Silo sat nearby, bandaging a shallow cut along her side. Her movements were quick, efficient. She hadn't said much either, but every few seconds, she glanced at Kael, eyes flicking toward him like a wind testing its direction. Finally, she said, "You're not broken." Kael didn't respond. "I've seen broken wielders," she continued, tying off the bandage. "Their eyes go hollow. Their voice changes. They start talking to things that aren't there." Kael exhaled through his nose. "And I'm supposed to feel better because I'm not insane." Silo tilted her head. "You didn't lose yourself." "No, just the one thing keeping me alive." He lifted his hand. The skin was pale. No umber lines. No heat. The requiem was still there. He could feel it like an echo behind his heart, but it refused to rise. As if shamed, or scared, or waiting, Silo got her feet. "You fought the ash-sworn and lived. You made a war relic listen to you. You even stood your ground against the myth. Kael laughed bitterly, and still got silenced like a candle. You faced him, Kael, she said. You faced the pale blade. That matters. He looked up at her, eyes tired. Why didn't he kill me? Silo hesitated, then said, because he doesn't need to. They camped under the remains of a shattered canopy. Half a tree, half a ruin, all warped from fire long past. Kael built the fire with his hands, not his heart. Flint and steel, not flame and will. It felt wrong, like asking a river to carry water in a bottle. Silo stayed close, sharpening her blade. Every now and then, her gaze would drift toward Kael, as if trying to weigh what remained of him. Finally, she asked, what did he say to you? Kael stirred the fire, avoiding her eyes. He said, to find him when my grief becomes purpose. Silo frowned. Cryptic. He said it like he already knew what was going to happen. Or like he wants something to happen, she said. The pale blade doesn't just hunt fragments. He collects them, absorbs them, changes them. Kael glanced at her. And what? Turns them into weapons. Into doctrine, Silo muttered. He thinks the old gods fail. He believes in replacing balance with obedience. Kael stared into the fire. And I carry the flame that rebelled. Silence. Then Silo whispered, that's why he didn't destroy you. The next morning was windless and sharp. The sky stretched flat and gray above them as they descended the ridge. The land ahead sloped into the obsidian fold, a vast, ancient basin once forged by volcanic fire, now dormant and cracked. Old travel maps called it a place of ruin and rest. Few entered unless they had nothing to lose. Kael walked in silence. The pendant shard Tyone had given him tucked safely in his cloak. Silo walked beside him, for once matching his pace, not rushing ahead. You think the Requiem will come back? He asked. Silo didn't answer at first. Then she said, it never left. It's just remembering how to speak. Kael gave her a sideways glance. You always talk like that. She smiled faintly. Only when I'm trying to avoid saying something real. Kael chuckled. Just once. The sound surprised both of them. By midday, they reached the basin's edge. What had once been a battlefield now lay dormant. Pillars of black stone, twisted trees, glassy soil. The sun hovered above them, veiled by thin clouds. Shadows stretched long and uneven across the cracked ground. In the distance, a spire rose, part temple, part watchtower, long since collapsed. Silo pointed toward it. There, she said. We rest inside, safe from weather and eyes. Kael nodded. They approached cautiously, weaving between fallen columns and half-buried shields. Rusted weapons jutted from the soil like warnings. No birds, no insects, only stillness. As they entered the ruin, Kael paused. A faint warmth? It curled at the edge of his senses. Not the Requiem, not fully, but a kind of whisper. A breath, a flicker, a heartbeat. He stepped inside. The air was thick with soot and old incense. Carvings lined the walls, faded depictions of warriors kneeling before flame. At the center of the temple lay a dais, its stone surface scorched, as if something had once ignited there and never truly faded. Kael touched it. The stone pulsed once beneath his fingers. He closed his eyes, and the fire stirred, not violently, but present. He breathed in, and for the first time since the Pale Blade's arrival, he felt calm. Not because he was ready, but because he was beginning to understand. That night, Kael stood alone atop the temple ruin, staring out over the fold. Silo had gone to sleep early, curled beside her bag, knife under her pillow. Kael let the wind tug at his cloak. The Requiem inside him remained quiet, but watching. He raised his hand and opened his palm. No flame answered, but that was okay. He whispered, I don't need you to fight for me. He looked to the horizon, toward where the Pale Blade had vanished, toward whatever came next. I'll walk toward the truth, even if it burns. The fire inside him pulsed once. Warm, proud. The obsidian fold did not sleep. Even in the silence of night, it watched. Through broken spires, through fields of black glass, through the heat that curled just below the surface of the earth like a heartbeat. Kael felt it. Not the Requiem. Not quite, but something deeper, something older. He walked quietly through the ruins of the fallen temple while Silo still slept, following faint heat trails in the soil. Each step stirred up a fine layer of soot that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. The fire within him hadn't returned, but the silence no longer frightened him. It felt like listening now, like breath before a word. Near the temple's edge, he found a wall he hadn't noticed before, half collapsed and overgrown with thorn roots, but still bearing a faint carving. He wiped the dust away with his sleeve. A gate. 2 massive doors carved into stone, marked by sigils Kael had only seen once before, in the seer's sanctuary. But this wasn't just art. There was depth. He stepped closer, placed his palm against it, and the surface rippled. The illusion shattered like dust swept away by wind. And behind it was a real gate, tall, arched, embedded into the base of the basin wall. Kael's breath caught. He turned back toward the temple, about to call for Silo. But something stopped him. A voice. Faint. Feminine. Old. Don't knock unless you're ready to remember. Kael's eyes darted. No one stood there. Only ash on the wind. He looked back to the gate. Then, stepped forward. He didn't touch the gate. He didn't need to. As soon as he stood before it, the carvings began to glow, soft orange veins, like cooled magma reawakened. The stone vibrated faintly beneath his feet, and the heat that radiated from the gate was not harsh. It was comforting, like standing beside an old hearth. The requiem stirred, a quiet pulse, not a flare, not a roar, just one long, deep note, like music from a buried instrument. Kael reached toward the sigil at the center of the gate, and the moment his fingers grazed it, the world changed, not violently, but completely. The wind stopped, the color faded, and Kael found himself standing in a mirror of the fold. Same terrain, same stone, but devoid of time. There was no sun, no sky, no shadow, only dim light, and the echo of his own breathing. He turned and saw her, a woman in silver robes, standing atop a dais of darkened flame. Her eyes shimmered like embers held behind glass. Her presence wasn't warm or cold, only aware. She spoke, and her voice sounded like Kael's thoughts remembered aloud. You have entered the gate of memory, the place where requiems sleep. Kael took a slow step forward. What is this? A fragment's reflection, she said. Here, you do not wield the requiem. You witness it. Kael's chest tightened. Why now? Because you listened, she said gently. Because you did not force the flame. You invited it. Behind her, the mirrored world shimmered again, revealing scenes. A battlefield, a crumbled city, a child cradling a fallen soldier, a woman alone in fire, reaching for nothing but the sky. Kael stepped closer, eyes wide. Are these memories? The woman nodded. Fragments of fragment, the sorrow that shaped the flame you carry. Kael stared into the vision of the lone warrior, the one who'd burned both sides during the war, the figure from his dreams. She was the first requiem. She was the first to refuse the gods, the woman said. The first to mourn all sides. The first to burn without allegiance. Kael swallowed. Why show me this? The woman smiled. Because you carry her grief. The visions faded, and the woman stepped forward. She reached out, and for a moment, Kael thought she might touch his heart. But instead, she placed a single glowing ember in his palm. Warm, heavy with memory. Your fire is not fury, she said. It is remembrance. Kael looked down at the ember. It pulsed once, and then dissolved into his skin. The fire inside him breathed again. Not just alive, awake. He blinked. The real world returned. The gate had vanished. Only the bare wall remained. He looked at his hand. No mark. But he could feel it now. The requiem no longer hiding. No longer afraid. It was waiting. Silo's voice broke the silence. Kael. He turned. She stood at the edge of the ruin, brows furrowed. You vanished for hours. I didn't go far, he said. You okay? He nodded. But in truth, he felt different. Not healed. Not whole. But chosen. Not by power. By grief remembered. Later, as they prepared to leave the basin, Kael caught Silo staring at him again. What? You're standing straighter, she said. He shrugged. Maybe I'm just tired of crouching. She cracked a grin. Or maybe you finally believe this flame is yours. He thought about that, then nodded. It's not mine alone, he said, but I'll carry it. Silo sheathed her blade. Good, because the Pale Blade Scouts won't be far behind, and we'll need more than smoke and luck next time. Kael glanced at the rising wind. The requiem answered, just once, in quiet warmth across his skin. He didn't speak, but the flame did, and its silence was louder than any war cry. They left the obsidian fold behind before sunrise. The land beyond was drier. Thinner trees, brittle grass, cracked stone trails where caravans used to pass decades ago. The wind here whispered differently, not like it had in the cliffs or the hollow zone. Here, it murmured of eyes watching. Silo walked ahead with her blade strapped to her back, and her hair tied high, shoulders tight. She didn't speak much. Kael kept pace behind her, quieter than usual, but no longer hesitant. Something had changed in him. The requiem was calm, but present. He could feel its weight like a second heartbeat, one that didn't pound or race, just pulse steadily like footsteps on stone. By midday, they reached the edge of canyon. Kael stepped to the cliff's edge and looked down. A narrow bridge stretched across the chasm, ancient and cracked, but still standing. Beneath it, the canyon walls were carved with faded murals of blades long dead. Some wore crowns, others carried chains. All looked like they were waiting. Silo crouched beside the bridge, studying the stone. Someone crossed here recently, she said. 3, maybe 4 riders. Light horses, no wagons. Kael's brow furrowed. Scouts. Too well organized, she replied. Ashsworn don't travel light unless they're tracking something. Or someone. She didn't say you, but the word lingered anyway. Kael stepped onto the bridge. It held his weight. He took it slow, letting the wind tug at his cloak, listening for the groan of old stone. Silo followed, keeping her boots light on the cracks. Halfway across, Kael stopped. A shape stood at the other end. Alone. Still. Waiting. It was a woman. Or maybe just the shape of one. Clad in pale gray armor, cloth robes drifting in the wind. Her face was hidden behind a steel half-mask. The upper half of her face covered, the bottom left bare, revealing lips that never moved. She held no weapon, but Kael could feel the pressure in the air, like standing near thunder just before it struck. Silo drew her dagger. The woman raised her hand, fingers open, unthreatening. Then she spoke, not aloud, but directly into Kael's mind. He remembers you. Kael froze. The requiem stirred, not in fear, but in something older. Recognition. Kael swallowed. Who are you? The woman tilted her head. I am one of his eyes. Silo muttered. That's a pale blade envoy. Kael nodded. Why send her? Why not come himself? He does not call to those who have not chosen. Kael clenched his jaw. I haven't chosen anything. Not yet. The pressure in the air increased. Like the requiem was flaring without permission. Kael reached inside himself, tried to calm it, and the flame listened. The envoy stepped forward, bare feet silent on the bridge. Silo moved to intercept Blade Out, but the envoy stopped. He does not fear you. He waits. He watches. He believes you are worthy of truth. Kael narrowed his eyes. What truth? The woman raised her hand again. From her palm rose a flicker. Not fire, but memory. It formed into an image. A child, standing in front of a collapsing gate. Soldiers dragging a woman away. The child screamed. Flame erupted from the cracks in the stone. Not uncontrolled, but protective. Kael stared, breath frozen in his throat. That's me. That is who you were. Silo looked between them. What is this? Kael didn't answer, because he remembered that moment. Barely. A broken flash in his earliest memories. A woman reaching out, eyes full of sorrow. A name whispered into smoke. His name. The image faded, and the envoy spoke again. He knew even then. The requiem has always remembered you. Kael stepped forward. And what does the pale blade want now? The envoy paused. He wants you to remember him. Then she raised her hand, and the bridge fractured. Kael barely reacted in time. He grabbed Silo and leapt back as a stone beneath them crumbled. The center of the bridge gave way in an explosion of dust and force, and they landed hard on their side of the canyon. The envoy was gone, vanished into the wind. Silo coughed, pushing herself upright. That wasn't a message. That was a test. Kael stood slowly, heart pounding. The requiem simmered. I think, he said quietly, he's trying to wake something up. They made camp in a grove of skeletal trees just beyond the canyon. Kael sat with his arms wrapped around his knees, staring into the fire. A real one, made with kindling and flint. The requiem remained calm, but alert, like it was listening through his skin. Silo approached, handing him a water flask. He drank, then asked, "Why does he want me to remember?" She sat beside him. Power like his, it's never about control. It's about legacy. The Pale Blade doesn't want to destroy you. He wants to rewrite you. Kael nodded. "And if I don't agree?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Kael dreamed that night, but it wasn't a nightmare. He stood in a familiar place, the scorched ruins of the temple where his story had begun. Only now it was whole again. Light streamed through intact glass windows. Children laughed in the distance. A woman stood at the altar, her face turned toward the fire. His mother. He knew in his bones. She turned and whispered one word. "Choose." He woke with the echo still in his chest. By dawn, they were walking again, toward the east, toward the lands where the Pale Blade was said to reign. Kael didn't walk with fear now. He walked with fire, and the shadow that followed them was no longer just the enemy's. It was his own, waiting to be faced. The clouds above were torn, not by storm or wind, but by something else. Thin cracks stretched across the sky like claw marks, faint but visible, glowing faintly violet, as if reality itself had been scratched open. Kael stared upward as they walked beneath them, the horizon painted with dusk though the sun hadn't yet fallen. The requiem inside him pulsed quietly. Silo kept glancing up too. "You see them, right?" she asked. Kael nodded. "They weren't there yesterday. They're not natural," she said. "Tear lines. Magical fractures. The kind that only show up when something old is disturbed." Kael looked at her. Like the requiem? Or like the Pale Blade, using a fragment no human should survive? She quickened her pace. They followed a long-buried trail through fields of sunken rock and hollow trees. The land had once been fertile. Silo guessed to have belonged to a farming province, back when the region fell under the banner of Akram. Now, only stone remained. Stone, and the echo of something burned away. As they crossed the remains of an old road, Kael felt the first flicker. Not heat, not memory, but presence. It coiled just behind his ribs, a pressure like breath held in anticipation. The requiem stirred cautiously. Something nearby resonated. He turned slowly. There, near a jagged cluster of stone pillars, a figure stood alone, unmoving, armored. Kael froze, but it wasn't an ash swarm. The armor was wrong, too angular, laced with cracks. It had no mask, no weapon, just silence. Silo drew dagger. Fragment echo. Kael stepped forward, hand outstretched. "No," he said slowly. "This is something else." The figure shifted slightly, head tilting, eyes faintly glowing beneath a thin, broken helm. Then it spoke, not aloud, but through him. "You are the one who carries her grief." Kael stiffened. "You knew the requiem's first bearer." The figure took a step forward. "We all did." Silo moved closer, blade raised. Kael held out a hand. "Wait," the figure continued. "I'm one of the Forgotten 12, bound not to power, but to remembrance. We were tasked with preserving what the world wanted erased." Kael's voice trembled. "Why show yourself now?" The air crackled faintly around them. The wind dropped. "Because the Pale Blade has begun to rewrite what should have remained scar," the figure said. "And the requiem burns against false memory." Kael stepped closer. "Then help me stop him." The figure reached toward him, not to harm, but to give. From its hand floated a tiny shard, no bigger than a coin, carved with a strange rune. "Take this. It is a flame memory, not yours, but hers. The moment the requiem was born." Kael accepted it. The shard hummed in his palm, cold at first, then slowly warming. He gasped as the vision hit him. A battlefield, but not a war. A massacre. The sky burned red. Armies screamed on both sides. And at the center, a woman in silver, standing alone, her hands bloody. She wept as she raised her blade, not in rage, but in surrender. "No more gods," she whispered. "No more masters." She plunged the blade into the earth, and from it, fire erupted, not to destroy, but to end it all, to erase the rules of a world built on suffering. Kael staggered as the memory faded. The figure was gone, vanished like smoke in the wind. Silo caught him. "What did you see?" Kael looked down at his hand, the shard already disintegrating into light. "The moment she broke the order," he said quietly. "The moment the requiem stopped being a weapon and became a choice." They made camp at the base of a ruined aqueduct, surrounded by dry stone arches and fractured conduits. Kael sat beside a small flame, one he sparked by hand, not by will. The requiem pulsed, but did not burn. Silo sat nearby, watching the sky. The tear lines above them pulsed faintly, as if something massive waited behind the veil. Kael glanced at her. Do you ever wonder, what would happen if we didn't fight? Silo raised an eyebrow. You mean run? No, he said. I mean, if we just let the fragments fade. Let their power die. Silo shook her head slowly. It's too late for that. Because of the pale blade. No, she said. Because of you. Kael blinked. Silo's voice softened. You didn't just wake the requiem. You accepted it. And in doing that, you made a choice, even if you didn't realize it. Kael looked into the fire. He wasn't sure if he believed her, but the flame inside him didn't disagree. He dreamed that night of her, the silver-robed woman, the requiem's first. She sat by a river of ash, staring into the horizon, sword resting at her side. You carry what I could not, she said. A world that might be better than the one I left behind. Kael sat beside her in silence. She turned to him. Do not make the fire your voice, she whispered. Make it your witness. He woke before dawn. The sky was lighter, the tear lines duller now, as if watching had ended and waiting had begun. Kael stood slowly, the fire within him balanced. Not fierce, not fading, just awake. Silo stirred from her bedroll, eyes half-lidded. You all right? She asked. Kael nodded. I think I finally understand, he said. Silo sat up. Understand what? Kael's eyes met hers. I'm not carrying a weapon. He turned toward the horizon. I'm carrying a memory. The valley below smoldered. It wasn't burning, not visibly, but Kael could feel the heat rising through the stone beneath his boots, as if the land itself remembered what had once been set aflame. He stood at the cliff's edge, Silo beside him. Below, nestled between fractured mountains and glass-patched soil, lay the ruins of Varnhold, once the central temple of the Blade Vanguard. Now, only stone ribs remained, broken arches half buried in ash, a courtyard ringed with melted statues, and at its heart, a glowing seal. Kael's breath caught. It pulsed with a familiar rhythm, the same rhythm he felt in his chest. The first flame, Silo said quietly. The place where she broke the oath, where the requiem was born. Kael nodded slowly. I think I was always meant to come here. Then we go together. He looked at her. Even if it's a trap. She smiled, soft but steady. Especially if it is. The descent took an hour, longer than it should have. The air grew heavier the closer they got. Not with heat, but with resonance. Kael's skin itched. The requiem stirred beneath his ribs, not violently, but in recognition. It knew this place. They stepped through a corridor of scorched columns. Each one bore the melted mark of an ancient blade. Names erased, symbols warped. A shrine built by those who had once believed fire could be righteous. Now it was a grave. And still, the seal glowed. Kael approached it slowly. Silo stayed back, hand on her blade. The seal pulsed once, then again, like a heartbeat. He knelt and placed his hand upon it. The moment he did, the ground shuddered. Not violently, just enough to awaken. And from the edges of the ruins, they came. Ash-sworn. 6 of them. Then 8. Then more. Appearing like shadows between broken arches, spears drawn, armor gleaming with dull enchantments. Kael stood. Silo cursed softly. We've been followed. But Kael didn't draw his weapon. Because the moment the seal fully lit, a second figure stepped into view. Not armored, not masked, but cloaked in pale white robes. Eyes like smoke. Calm, measured. The pale blade. He didn't rush. He walked, slowly, steadily, between the ash-sworn, who all stepped back in perfect silence. He stopped 10 paces from Kael. I knew you'd come, he said. His voice was soft, like winter air. Grief always returns to its birthplace. Kael stood firm. You knew this place. I bled here, the pale blade said. When the order fell, when your requiem burned my oath away. Kael's heart pounded. You were one of them. I was her brother, he said simply. The word struck harder than any weapon. Silo took a step forward. That's not possible. But Kael felt it, not just in the pale blade's words, but in the way the requiem responded. A flicker, a pulse, recognition. She chose fire. the pale blade said, taking another step. I chose memory. I built something from what she left behind. A world that could not forget. Kael clenched his fists. You build a cage. I build order, the man said. I build a world where no child would carry what you now do. Kael shook his head. You kill wielders. You silence flame. Because flame deceives, the pale blade said. It burns not just the guilty, but everything it touches. He gestured around them. This place was once sacred. Now it's just bones. But your requiem keeps pulling us back here, to finish what should have ended long ago. Kael stepped forward. No, he said. It brought me here to remember, not to destroy. The pale blade's eyes narrowed. And what will you do then? Spare me? Save me? Try to rewrite the fire that chose you. Kael raised his hand. The requiem ignited. But this time it didn't explode. It rose, gentle, slow, a corona of soft embers that danced around him like light rain. He spoke, quiet, but clear. I'm not here to be your reflection. The flame burned brighter, steady and warm, not wild. I'm here to become her answer. The pale blade moved then, faster than thought, drawing a blade of ash and silver. Silo darted in, wind exploding at her feet, intercepting him, blades clashing. Kael dropped to one knee, placing both hands on the seal. The flame inside him surged, not to fight, to awaken. The seal opened. Light erupted from the earth, not harsh, but golden and deep, like sunlight caught in an eternal morning. The earth trembled. Statues cracked. Ashsworn staggered, and Kael fell into memory. He saw her, the Requiem's first, standing where he now stood, but surrounded by those who followed her. 12, then 20, then hundreds, broken, mourning, no longer soldiers. People. She raised her blade to the sky and spoke. Let this flame remember us, not for war, but for what we could not forgive. Then she pressed her blade into the seal and vanished. Kael returned to the present, breathless, but calm. He stood. The flame swirled around him now, not a weapon, but a promise. The pale blade pushed Silo back, blade raised. Kael stepped between them. The pale blade's sword met Kael's flame. There was no explosion, only light. The ash melted from his blade. His eyes widened, and Kael said, softly, You don't have to carry this alone. The pale blade staggered, then turned, and vanished into the wind. The ash-sworn fled. Silo dropped to her knees, panting. Did we just win? Kael stared at the seal, now dim. No, he said. We just began.